Today's topic on critical insights: compliance with regulations. How does compliance with regulations impact the operation of critical infrastructure?
So one question we get asked quite a bit is, what's the burden? What's the impact going to be on our operations for compliance? Well, I'd like to say it's zero. Ultimately, compliance to a body of regulations is improving your operational environment, but often it comes across as a burden. So we can't say it isn't to some extent. The hardest part is taking an effective operational program and bolting on a compliance program to that, because it does seem like a burden. It's all of a sudden all this new documentation that has to happen, all these new performance artifacts that have to be generated. It may change how you're doing things right now, and that's hard to take. You get comfortable doing something on a regular basis, and then all of a sudden you're being told you have to do it a little bit differently. It's the same thing, same result, but you have to do it differently to meet this compliance for regulation. So it is impactful, and that is one of the primary issues that we hear about all the time. It's going to take time. It's our experience that it's a cultural shift. All cultural shifts are change, and that most people don't like to do change. So you got to take it slow. What we teach is the educational route, informing why we're doing this, why is it important, versus telling. Telling never gets you to where you need to be. You can't come in like a bulldog if you're one of those guys in the compliance office coming to help make this compliance modification to the organization. It's going to cause grief. It's going to be very difficult. So you want to take your time to educate. Why do we do this? Is it legally required, or are we volunteering to do this? That can make a big difference in attitude. So, really explain to those that have to live in the operational world that they have a job to do, and trying to make them do more is hard. It's going to be a burden to them. So you want to make it as easy on them as possible, but still meet the requirements. So take your time, educate, spend some time making sure that they understand the whys we're doing this, and you'll be better off.
How can organizations ensure continual compliance with changing regulations?
So one of the biggest challenges with any regulation is the modification of it. In our industry, especially in the electric sector, it's changing all the time, and those regulations are abundant in the electric sector. So we can use that as a good example of how this is a challenge and how to overcome it. First and foremost, it's a discipline. You have to build in that discipline to track and manage and be involved in the compliance change. In the electric sector, there's NERC. They have standard development teams that are building and making changes all the time. You have to follow those. You need to read them. You need to really understand that. And if you're a compliance officer or an analyst in a compliance team, you should be going to these events in person if possible, at least being on the line and listening to what's going on. Read all the FERC orders that come out, read all the things that NERC posts, read external guidance documents, really understand the changes that are happening in order for you to take that information and translate it into something that is actionable in your organization. Track those timelines. Get a spreadsheet together if you don't have another tool, and build a timeline of how these are being unfolded, and make sure you're aware of it, and then communicate to the proper people. You got to communicate upstream, and you got to communicate downstream that all these changes are happening, and that's going to be your best start.
Can you discuss the challenges and benefits of regulatory compliance?
Regulatory compliance, there's arguments for it and arguments against it. The biggest arguments against it from the utility space, it's too much. We don't need you. We're doing just fine. In some cases, that is true. When you're dealing with some of the more complicated things, and when you're looking at it from a general perspective, I'm flipping myself over to the regulator, I'm looking at a lot of things that aren't getting done. I see small companies that aren't doing things. I see large companies that say they're doing stuff, but then they're having issues. The con of it is something you don't want. You don't never want somebody to come and tell you what to do. So that's a burden. That is a con. You don't understand why they want in that business. The pro side of it, from a, if we're looking at this holistically as an infrastructure that impacts our daily lives, from a regulator, from a governmental, from a state, from a user, a consumer perspective, regulation can be a very positive thing in the fact that it does make things better in effectiveness. It makes things more stable. It can make your operations improve. It can ensure that bad things that happened in the past no longer happen again. Big blackouts that have happened all have some sort of root cause, and those root causes can be taken care of. Yes, we can fix it one time, but let's make sure it never happens and embed that into a regulation, into a standard. That's the good thing. On the other side, I'm going to go back to the con side of the utilities, it's freaking expensive. It is expensive. There's no doubt to say that the financial impact is big. And that on the utilities, it hurts because in the electric sector, for example, you have to go ask for your money if you're a big IOU. You have to go to the commissioners and ask for a certain percentage that's coming. So, if you're looking for rate cases, you've got to be able to articulate this abundance of cost, that's coming that way, and that gets passed on to the consumer. So back over to the consumer side, that's a con for them because then their rates go up. So there's a lot of impact on it, but ultimately we want resilience. We want resilience of our critical infrastructures because they're darn important. Without them, the consequences are much greater than the burdens.
How does non-compliance impact critical infrastructure and associated entities?
So non-compliance has a huge impact on electric utilities especially. It could definitely be a financial burden. Well, any of the mandatory requirements in the electric sector, and those are the only mandatory cybersecurity and operational things that we really focus on, those cost a pittance. It's not a big number for most utilities. Even for a large company that can get a $25 million fine, it's a rounding error. So the financial impact is there, it hurts, but the reputational hit that these utilities take could be gigantic. The regulator sees you as being non-compliant. They may think, what else are you not doing? And you get put on this list of a bad actor. You're not participating. So there's that part of non-compliance. The other part of non-compliance is that you end up failing somewhere. You actually cause harm to the critical infrastructure. You cause harm to the grid. You cause harm to, your oil and gas refinery by not being compliant. And that's a big deal. It's funny, when we talk about compliance, we often think of it as a regulation, right? Well, there's also internal compliance too. You have your own expectations as an organization, and being non-compliant to those elements also have that same impact. So compliance is super important, especially in organizations that have to be up at all times. That resilience aspect, that uptime is the most important thing. Compliance is essential. So if you liked everything that you heard here today, keep us in mind. We're Archer Energy Solutions. This is what we do. We live and breathe critical infrastructure security, physical and cyber, and operational and planning. It is our life. It is what we have built our entire organization around, and we're excited to be able to help anyone that needs any help. Give us a call.
If you need assistance protecting your critical infrastructure, reach out and contact Archer today.